I've always been very, very impressed at how HubSpot has grown through ecosystem, both solution and technology.
The biggest play that I've been focused on the last couple years is building out the co-sell motion with some of our top tech partners.
At the end of the day, we all know that successful, scalable partnerships are not easy and they're not simple.
Most partner leaders are in organizations where the C-suite is not fully bought into the value of partners.
Welcome back to Partnerships Unlocked, where we have fast, tactical conversations with partnership leaders at the top of the game. Extremely excited for today's conversation with a friend and just such an impressive partner leader at such an impressive ecosystem company. We've got Kelly Sarabyn, the Director of Technology Partnerships from HubSpot. Kelly, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, Greg. Excited to be here. I run our tech partner program, strategy, and partner management team at HubSpot. I've been here a little over 3 years.
How big is your ecosystem, just so folks understand the scope of that?
I'd say we have almost 1,600 technology partners at HubSpot. And then on the solutions partner side of the house, we have about 6,000 to 7,000 solutions partners.
So not a small ecosystem. I've always been, just as a little aside from me, I've always been very, very impressed at how HubSpot has grown through ecosystem, both solution and technology. I regularly mention it as kind of a white rabbit to chase. And I'm sure you would say you guys have lots of room for improvement and a lot of things you feel like you could be doing better. But at the end of the day, it's something that is not really being done incredibly well by very many companies. So it's exciting to see what you guys are doing. And a lot of the announcements you guys made at Partner Day just really showed that you're leaning into that, which I just find incredibly inspiring as someone that's building in the space.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. HubSpot's definitely made long-term investments in partners and kind of, I think, at core sees them as, a key part of and a key extension of the company and its mission, which I think is great.
And I think it's why you guys are going to keep winning, but that's a separate conversation. So I'd love to jump into some tactical brass tacks for the audience. I think everyone gets I think this might be our 12th episode or something like that. Everyone gets the idea. We're going to ask one play you ran that succeeded wildly, what you learned about that, one that blew up in your face and what you learned from that, and then maybe 2 or 3 things that you wish you knew earlier in your partnerships career. And actually, speaking of partnerships career, I realized we didn't even get to your career before HubSpot. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure. I have, I guess, a circuitous way towards partnerships. I started, originally I was in the law, and that was way back when. But then the way I got into the tech industry was I worked at a branding agency. So we did storytelling branding. It wasn't visual branding. It was how do you kind of develop the core story of your company. And so I led that in a creative team there, and a lot of B2B tech companies like Redis Labs, where it really crafted their core brand story. And then from there, I decided, I loved learning about a bunch of different industries and companies. I wanted to try going in-house. So I led marketing for an early stage startup called Pandium. And that was an embedded iPaaS, and we sold to the technology partner persona, as well as product and engineering. And so that's actually how I landed in partnerships. I was essentially selling to partner leaders. And so I, kind of had a content-led strategy. So like you, I interviewed a bunch of partner leaders, I put out a bunch of reports and ebooks. And so I learned a ton about the industry and the field. I kind of look at it back as getting a little mini MBA in partnerships by going through that. And it was also how I connected with my boss at HubSpot at the time, Scott Brinker, because he was one of those leaders that I had interviewed. And so I came to HubSpot and was originally doing a lot of 2-partner marketing, and then kind of expanded my scope into programs and strategy and grew from there.
That's awesome. So I think, well, maybe now there are people that start their career in partnerships, but it's extremely rare. that someone actually like, oh, my first job was partnership, and this is all I've ever known. So it's always interesting to see how people got here. But yeah, let's jump in. So, what is one play that you have run, learned, maybe rinsed and repeated that just really has worked really well to drive meaningful outcomes in partnerships? And why do you think it worked? And what did you learn?
I think the biggest play that I've been focused on the last couple years is building out the co-sell motion with some of our top tech partners. And it hasn't been a monetized play. It's truly been let's find those win-win-wins where we can go to market together, sell together, do joint demos. And, a few of the components I think that went into it to make successful is doing a really good job up front of understanding who the right partners are for that motion. So in our case, right, looking at our product and understand, hey, when we're selling into these more sophisticated customers, what is the key white space in our product that those prospects are looking for and need to kind of want to buy our solution as part of a joint platform and a joint solution. And so for us, that could be things like enterprise CPQ. It can be things like field service tools, and it can be certain data, robust data tools, for example, or advanced calling and SMS, advanced ABM, those type of tools. Partner technology is another one, right? Like HubSpot does not have PRM, so that's definitely also can be white space for us when you're going into the more sophisticated customers. And so I think that's one thing I'll say up front, understand what motion you're trying to ramp up and why you're doing it, and then make sure that you have a profile for what the right partners are for that motion. And then after that, I think really dialing in that JVP, so doing that work to come up with that story and having it be really concise, because with co-selling, once you're out in the field, your sellers, your partner sellers, your CSMs, your partner CSMs, you want everyone to be able to very quickly grasp what is the core value, what is the core message, because they have a million things on their plate. I'll say HubSpot sellers are typically selling all of our products. They're selling marketing software, sales software, service software, data software. It's a lot, so you got to be really punchy and concise, and you should do that work first. The other thing I would say is repetition. So they say in marketing, often brands need 16 touch points before a brand will stick with someone. And I feel like that resonates with me as well. When you think about ramping up co-sell, you've got to be doing the lunch and learns. You've got to be having nice touch points when you actually close the deals and the follow-ups from those deals. You should have, written enablement. You should have AI-driven enablement, right? You want a bunch of different touch points because that's what it takes to be sticky over time. And so making sure you have a strategy around that. And then finally, another component I would say is operations, making sure that you're not asking your sellers or your partner sellers to go do the manual work. You're not relying on them to log things they're not normally logging. So setting that up to be as easy and breezy as you can, given whatever their current workflows are today. So really studying everybody's workflows from your partner managers to your sellers on both sides, and creating a smooth process that's also tracking and recording it. Because what you're going to want to do as part of those 16 touch points is make sure you're always tracking those wins and you have the data to then share back to everyone, and you have the individual stories that make that data come to life that you can share back to everyone. And so I think it's all of those components together that we're able to make it successful. I know that's not one quick and dirty trick, but I do think for people who are looking to ramp that up, which, I'll say I was ramping it up from scratch. It was just not a motion other than people doing it reactively and ad hoc on their own. I would definitely consider all those different components when you start to build out your strategy.
No, I love that you didn't oversimplify the complexity and the amount of moving parts that are necessary to do that successfully. I think, I don't think maybe some people are going to be coming here looking for some cheat codes, but at the end of the day, we all know that successful, scalable partnerships are not easy and they're not simple. It's one of the reasons we built Euler, but with something like you just described with co-sell, like you said, you have to know who you're partnering with and why you're partnering with them and what's the value to the customer and create that JVP and educate both sides and have the operational underpinnings to actually track and manage all of that. I mean, there's just so much that needs to be done successfully. And my takeaway from what you just said is that it's no one thing. It's not one of those things. Everyone's like, oh, it's enablement or it's the JVP. But really, to do it successfully, it sounds like you're saying like you've got to have the minimum viable aspect of all of those things to even get it off the ground. And then you have to constantly be like iterating and improving on those so that the story is better, the process is easier for, the sales teams, and it's just something that actually scales versus is done in a very kind of like ad hoc way.
100%.
Awesome. I love that. That was great, and no one has shared that perspective of it. So I'm really glad you did. So let's go the other way. I think I enjoy the second question more very often than the first one, even though it's harder to succeed than to fail in partnerships. I think like you can learn a lot from failures, and I think all of us that have been doing this for a minute have had a lot of them. So picking one is hard. But what is the one thing? What is the one thing that seemed like it should be a absolute win and was an unexpected failure, and you learned a lot from it?
Yeah, I think a good example for me is field marketing events. I think that's like a very well established play in B2B. We know it can be successful. But what I realized when you do them with partners, it can become, I would say, challenging and time consuming to keep things on track. And the difference between doing like a field marketing event when you're on your own, right, and you have all the resources under your control, so it's like much more linear. But then when you're trying to do it with a partner, as you know, there's huge advantages, right? You can tap into their audience. There's going to be efficiencies of scale and resources that can make the ROI better. You can use, account mapping data to have them invite, their customers that are your high intent prospects. There's lots of advantages, but there's also, I know John Miller at one point called this the planning tax. He used to be the CMO at Demandbase, and he was kind of explaining why he didn't invest more in partner marketing. And I think one of the complications can be if you don't have really strong planning up front ahead and then sort of go deeper onto that and know that there's going to be repeated value, the ROI can often slip away. And so my lesson learned from that is you really need to have much more clarity and alignment documented before you even kick off the event, right? So I think my mistake was being, in the spirit of the partnership, like this is a great event. The idea was cool. Everybody was excited. And then we moved forward versus being, crystal clear on like the commitments before you kind of even sign on the metaphorical or real dotted line of like, this is what we're going to do and who's going to do it. And then I think, making sure you understand the accountability on their side, like what are their KPIs and whoever you're dealing with, like what is their KPIs roles, who's on the hook for what. Because often I think multiple players become involved. You'll be talking to the partner manager, the partner marketer on their side, could be a marketer on your side, right? So I feel like it was really a planning fail of not making sure that all those things were super buttoned up front. And then I think the other thing I learned is even beyond that, things are still going to happen on both sides, right? So for me, the goal is to find partners where you can have repeated plays versus just doing more one-offs, because I think that's where you just up-level the uncertainty in terms of what's going on in other people's businesses, and there's a lot more unknowns. So as you build out that motion, if you can find certain partners where you have a winning playbook and a repeated playbook, it builds trust, it builds alignment, it builds accountability and responsibility to the endeavor versus a lot of these one-offs people can be a little bit more casual about, which, I'll continue to do them one-off because I think they're really valuable. And with those, just like putting in those clear guidelines and alignments and much more documented up front. But then also I just think bigger picture, looking at the motion as a whole, making sure you have a number of partners where you can kind of have a repeated cadence. So that was my story of not hitting it out of the park.
It's funny because I think every single partner leader that has ever done partner marketing has experienced what you just said. Like, oh, we love them. This sounds like a great event. We want to have a presence at this, conference or wherever, whatever we're doing it around. They have a great client list. This totally could work. And then if there is an actual like structure of like, how is this thing being executed well leading up to the event, and how are we making sure that we maximize ROI on the tail of the event? If that's not there, nobody's taking ownership of that either between the partners or even within your own business. It can very quickly just become we're throwing money at things for like awareness. So yeah, I totally agree. I think because I've been so busy, I think I've done some of that here at Euler. Um, sad to
Greg,
say.
did you bail on our field event that we were trying to put on together?
No, it's been
No,
good
we
with,
put on some good events together,
we put
I
on
feel
some
like.
good events. No, you guys are great to work with from that
Virtual
perspective.
and in person, so.
Yes. No, any lack of ROI from anything we've done is totally on me. But it's been great. But yeah, I agree. I think you're the second or third person to mention that as the like, you got to be careful with these like sponsorships. Hey, we're sponsoring this happy hour, we're sponsoring this thing, and then like, it ends up being just partners at the event, and it's not even clients or prospects. I think it's a slippery slope with those events, and just even having like some sort of a process or some sort of a plan going into it on how are you going to actually get ROI out of it is helpful, because most people have no plan. So that's actually a really good one. Again, you're dropping ones that aren't mentioned very often, so I appreciate that, because we've definitely we've had some commonality in the answers on some of these things. All right, well then let's jump into a couple of quick hitters. What are 2 or 3 things that you just wish you knew earlier in your partnerships career that would have just saved you some headache?
I think the biggest thing is both the importance of executive buy-in and how you go about getting it, because I think it's something that we probably at this point all heard before, but nevertheless I still see people in action kind of not going after it, because I think it's hard, right? And so it also, I would say, requires like almost a founder entrepreneur mindset in many cases, because the reality is most partner leaders are in organizations where the C-suite is not fully bought into the value of partners. Like I would say most people, it's like they see some value, but they're not fully bought in. And so people are dropped in, and maybe they have a number, but it's not, it's kind of hazy. Maybe they even don't have a number. It's like that's under conversation. But really getting people to buy into the bigger multi-year vision, I think that's critical. And it really requires that the partnership leader come up with that themselves, right? Like put together that vision, put together some social proof, get the numbers, put themselves out to say like, hey, over multiple years, this is the numbers that I could get to get people excited and bought in. But you have to be very proactive. And that's where I see like people talk about it a fair amount, but in action, I often see people being more passive.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just speaking to a group of partner managers on like a little kind of boot camp that they were doing, and they're like, how do you go from 0 to 1 successfully? And I spent maybe way too long, but at least 5 minutes talking about exactly what you just said. Like, before you ever do anything else, if you have to get aligned, because otherwise you're just immediately behind the 8 ball, and it's very hard to get yourself out of that kind of like trying to dig yourself out position. And that alignment is like, just assume it's not there. Like,
Yeah,
especially for the
until you get
long-term
like
business
real
partnership.
verbal confirmation and you hear it articulated back to you, then it's like I agree. And I think that's part of what I've seen in the field, and certainly I think it often takes experience to learn. But you think if no one's saying that there's a problem top down, that you're okay, right? And so you can just go about partnering, and it'll all work out, right? And your numbers will be what they are. But the reality is, it's not enough that nobody's premature flagging you, because things change, things get tight, like people start to might question it later. Like I've seen that happen in organizations where people feel like they're fine, but then a year and a half later, suddenly that's when the C-suite is like, wait a second, what is this line items on our book that we're paying all this headcount for, and what is it producing? And often, to your point, by then it's too late, right? Like, because that's not the time to try to get people bought into the vision. I mean, still try, but like often it's too late. So like getting in there early and pitching it, because you might have to pitch it over and over, right? It's like, again, probably a process of persuasion. So yeah, it's definitely something I recommend at any level, whether you're a partner manager, a VP, a director, like wherever you are, trying to understand, are the executives bought in? And if not, what can I do to contribute to move that process forward?
Yeah, no, that's such a strong call out. That could have been the other number one play. I mean, without that one, you're on borrowed time. But what else?
I think the other one that, you probably are sick of hearing this because this is like your baby, but I can't say it enough for people in the back of the stadium, which is the importance of good operations. I just think this is attribution, the definition of influenced revenue, the difference between source, influence, and how you're driving retention, for example. Like these things can be happening, but if you can't capture it with data, then you can get yourself into that same corner where you can't make the case. And you also don't, if you don't have any level of like good visibility around that kind of attribution, you also don't know who to invest in, which partners to invest in. You don't really know how big your team should be, right? Like, and you need to get that. And I think, to me, operations is the data visibility, and then it's the kind of efficiency. Those are like two big buckets, and you really need both. And I would say, especially right now, with AI tools starting to be more pervasive in use, if you're not using them, then you're gonna start to lose out to your competitors in terms of organizations that are using them to run like their partner programs and their partnerships and their whole go-to-market. In fact, they're just going to become more successful, more competitive, have more to offer. And so you're gonna fall behind. And so I think those things are just critical. And it's just, I think, and another thing to say is partner leaders are often put in a position where this is another thing that they often have to fight for within their organization. And so I just I cannot recommend making that fight enough, because it's really kind of like not having the foundation to your house and wanting to like build a mansion and it's like it's just going to crumble down with your like like straw foundation or straw walls. Like it just won't work over time. So that's something I'm like constantly talking about, but I know you knew this, but I feel like for people who aren't ops minded, which a lot of partner leaders might have come from sales, and so they get the human component of this very well, and they know how to sell and be persuasive, but like kind of that more dry backbone operational is not first nature to them. So I would definitely recommend everyone think about that one long and hard, because that's how you really can scale any program.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you called that out, and that has not been called out as much with the other guests. And I think it's because, honestly, you brought up something like if they come from sales or if they come from customer success or account management into partnerships. I think the thing that they take for granted in those roles and most other roles is ops, because it exists for them. Like, you can't do those jobs without ops. And you shouldn't be doing partnerships without ops, but we have been. And so many of us have been for so long. And again, I was just lucky. My first VP of partnerships, like my first role as a partner manager over 10 years ago, we had partner ops. I didn't know that it was rare because it was my first job in partnerships. I had no context. I was like, okay, cool, this is a thing. And then every other company since then, I tried to hire partner ops, and I got laughed out of the room because they're like, go drive some revenue first and then start asking for things. And yet, so I built it myself, and I begged, borrowed, and stole resources from the sales ops team, because you're absolutely right. The only way to build a scalable program and long-term success is with ops. Otherwise, that amount of time you're spending on ops just goes up in line with the amount of partners you have. And then now we see, like, depending on what kind of companies I'm talking to daily, between 30 and 70% of their time is spent on ops. more or less. Like they're a revenue role, you know, like if a salesperson did that, they'd get fired. Um,
And they wouldn't be
but
hitting their
like,
quota either.
right, exactly. And then they're like, well, why aren't you hitting your quota, partner manager? And we're like, well, that's because I'm spending most of my time on stuff that's not directly contributing to the quota. So yes, I agree. I love that you called that out. This is the hill that I will die on for sure. I know that this is going to make the difference over the next few years in terms of like what partner programs and leaders kind of like excel. It's going to be process and data, which all falls under ops. So I absolutely love that you brought that up. Anything else that you want to kind of, any more unlocks or any final thoughts that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I'll say a final unlock is just the value of building relationships accrues over time in partnerships. Especially if you stay in certain industry or space, like building up those relationships and keeping those, it's kind of incredibly helpful in time to value that you can kind of have already built up the relationships, you know how people work, and you can go into those relationships. And I think, relationships are going to continue to be an essential part of partner. And so making sure that that's something you think about both with your strategic partners, where I think it's much more obvious you're going to spend a lot of direct time with them, but also with your longer tail. It's like, how do you infuse human touch points in that experience so that you can continue to make those partnerships more successful and feel more human, even at scale.
I love that. Yeah, that's my favorite part of the job. I totally agree. Just you take if you're good at your job, or I guess if you're good at building relationships, you might not be hitting revenue metrics theoretically, but hopefully you're good at both. You take these relationships with you for the rest of your career, and if you stay in the same industry, that just gives you like a jump start at any new role you have. So that's awesome. Kelly, this has been one of my favorite conversations. Thank you for joining. So much valuable information for the audience. So we'll have to have you back on whenever we do season 2.
I'm here for it. Thank you for having me, Greg.
Awesome. Have a good one.